This day in sports history. This episode is brought to you by Stirling Soap Company. How often do you think about your soap? Well, if you answered, not much, maybe you should. You see, a lot of what passes for soap in stores is technically not soap, according to the FDA's definition. It's full of lab-created chemicals and detergents because, well, it's cheaper to make. Now, what if you could buy natural soap made from natural ingredients like tallow, palm oil, coconut oil, and scented with essential oils, and for just a little more than you'd pay for grocery store soap? Stirling Soap is 100% natural, and with a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne, there's a product and a scent for just about everybody. Check them out for yourself at stirlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. Hey, and welcome to another edition of This Day in Sports History, the one true daily podcast dedicated to talking about sports history. This is your host, Steve White, ready for another tour around what happened on this day in sports. This day's set of memories starts on a bit of a down note, though. That's because on this day in 1991, Magic Johnson announced he had HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, and retired from basketball. Even though at this point the AIDS epidemic had been rampaging in the U.S. for a decade, there was still a lot of misinformation and stigmatization about the disease. It was seen as a disease that only affected homosexual men and intravenous drug users, leading to more ostracization for an already marginalized portion of the population. Magic found out about his positive test for HIV just before the '91 season started. The Lakers had already played 3 games by this point, and Magic's absence in those games led to a lot of questions about where he was. When he made his announcement on this day of his positive result and his immediate retirement, it sent shockwaves not only through the NBA, but the world. First, Magic was one of the all-time greats in the NBA. He'd played 12 years up to this point with the Showtime Lakers. Heck, he made the Lakers the Showtime Lakers. And he won championships and wowed fans all over the world with what he could do on a basketball court. Second, with HIV seen as only a disease for homosexuals and drug users, there were a lot of questions about how he contracted it. That would come out later, that he'd had numerous heterosexual relationships, what he called harems of women in different NBA towns. And third, and I can remember thinking this along with a lot of other people, we all remember this day in '91 and we thought that this was a death sentence. We'd seen the pictures of the sick and dying and believed that we were going to watch the guy who'd won the NCAA title in '79 at Michigan State and then go on to win 5 NBA championships for the Lakers. He was just going to wither away in front of our eyes and be gone by the next summer. We just didn't know as much about the disease as we should have. Magic became an immediate activist for raising awareness for HIV/AIDS. He encouraged people to go get tested. And indeed, in the immediate aftermath, there was an upsurge in people getting tested. Magic focused a light on the epidemic that had been largely ignored by the media and the government in the 80s because, again, it was only a so-called gay disease. And of course, Magic showed that you can live with HIV and control it. He did come back to play in the All-Star game later that season, even after several players expressed concern of playing with him and the possibility of the infection spreading through a cut and sweat. Those fears quieted down a good bit once more information trickled out about how the disease was transmitted and how it wasn't. He was allowed to play on the Olympic Dream Team in Barcelona the following summer, and he attempted to come back in '94 before retiring again. Magic's announcement on this day was devastating for the Lakers as a team as well. After finishing second in the Western Conference and going all the way to the NBA Finals in '91, losing in 5 games to the Chicago Bulls, Magic's sudden exit on this day was tough to recover from. The Lakers finished 4 games above 500 and in 8th place in the West, losing in the first round of the playoffs to the Portland Trail Blazers. Johnson set up the Magic Johnson Foundation in November of '91 in an effort to bring more awareness of the disease and fundraise for research. Papers published many years later called Johnson's announcement a public health catalyst, leading to rapidly correcting the public's understanding of who was at risk of infection and prolonging patients' lifespans as a result of earlier access to medical care. It was also associated with increased concern about HIV, leading to attitude and behavior changes that would lead to reduced risk. On this day in 1925, the mighty Michigan Wolverines were stifled by Northwestern, the weather, and a man named Tiny. Michigan was quite the powerhouse in 1925. They had one of the best quarterback-receiver combinations in college football history, with Benny Friedman and Benny Oosterbaan. Both of those guys would be consensus All-Americans at the end of the season. Michigan had won their 5 games so far that year and outscored their opponents 180-0. The Wildcats were 3-2 and had been able to hold only one opponent scoreless. But fortune shone upon Northwestern on this day. The weather in Chicago was miserable. Well, it had been miserable for about 5 days as rain drenched the Midwest and turned Soldier Field into a swampy mess. It rained heavily throughout, and the mud in some places was 6 inches deep. So it was important to get some points on the board early before field conditions deteriorated further. Northwestern forced a fumble in the first quarter. After a few plays, the Wildcat drive stalled in the red zone. Coach Glenn Thistlethwaite sent Tiny Lewis out to kick the field goal, and his aim was true from 18 yards out. Field position played a huge part in this one, not only because that's how the game was played back then, with lots of punting early in a possession, but also due to the boggy field. With the score still 3-0 late in the fourth quarter, Northwestern had their backs against their own goal line, so they intentionally took a safety to give themselves some breathing room to kick it away. The strategy worked, and Northwestern won 3-2. The 3 points Michigan allowed in this game were the only points they gave up the entire season. They went on to win the Big Ten championship, but at the end of the year, because of their loss on this day, were second in the country behind Alabama. Wolverine head coach Ned Yost called his '25 team the best he ever coached. Since we're on the topic of low-scoring games, we're less than a year removed from the Minnesota Vikings' 3-0 win over the Las Vegas Raiders last December, with the game-winning field goal coming with less than 2 minutes left in regulation. Now, it's a bit surprising in today's NFL that a score like that is possible, but at least it wasn't as bad as what happened on this day in 1943. On a rainy day in Detroit, the Lions and New York Giants played to a 0-0 tie. The two teams combined to generate just 214 yards that day. The Giants completed only one pass for 3 yards. The Lions were a little more prolific through the air, completing 4 passes for 24 yards. They also logged 10 carries for 30 yards during the contest. In 1943, a score like that was not that unusual. It had happened more than 70 times in the first couple of decades of the league. Teams didn't play overtime yet, and they wouldn't for several more years. But this game did mark the last time that an NFL game ended in a 0-0 tie. Are you a hockey fan? Then you'll love Eric Zweig's new book, Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2. It's a treasure trove of untold tales, bizarre incidents, and captivating trivia that will leave even the most devoted puckhead astounded. The intense rivalries, epic showdowns, and historic clashes that shaped the NHL's early years, it's all in there. Zweig uncovers the true stories that helped shape the sport, ensuring that you will never look at hockey the same way again. Check out Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2 on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. On this day in 1999, Tiger Woods won the inaugural World Golf Championship played that year in Valderrama, Spain. He kind of limped to the finish. Well, not physically, that was years later. I'm talking figuratively. He came to the 17th hole on this day with a comfortable 4-shot lead, but he yanked his tee ball into the water and he made triple bogey. That let Miguel Angel Jimenez back into it, and it forced a playoff. Tiger birdied the first playoff hole to end the tournament for his 4th consecutive win and the 5th in his previous 6 tournaments. His 4 straight wins to close out the year equaled what Ben Hogan did back in his magical year of 1953. This was also Tiger's 8th win of the year, and there was a guy who thought that he may be able to break Byron Nelson's record of 18 PGA wins in a season at some point in his career. The guy who thought that was Nelson himself. After the WGC, Nelson sent a handwritten note to Tiger saying, "Tiger, I love watching you play on the TV. It's a lot of fun to watch you. If you do break my record, I'll be the first one to congratulate you. I had the record for 55 years. If you go ahead and break it, Merry Christmas." And time now for today's Nothing to Do with Sports Did You Know? Have you ever heard the term Easter egg relating to something to be found in a movie or a video game? Well, one theory as to the origin says that the movie Rocky Horror Picture Show is the source. During production, actors hid actual eggs on set for others to find. Several were not found and actually show up in the movie. That's all I've got for you today. Make sure to stop on by tomorrow for another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.